We love the opportunity to share with you inspiring and interesting and uplifting stories. That's kind of what we do here on The Big Impact. And our guest today has all of those things rolled into one under the heading of corporate action hero. I like that. I don't know if John Davis comes with a cape or some other uniform, but we'll say hello and welcome you onto the program. How are you?
Well, I am doing great. Thank you. I do not come with a cape. Superheroes wear capes, but they also wear their underwear on the outside of their pants. That's why I'm an action hero, not a superhero.
We do want to keep things in the proper order. That's for
Right.
sure.
Right.
You do have quite a story to share, and I've tried to introduce our audience to the reality that over the years of The Big Impact, sometimes we have guests on that they're very familiar with, and sometimes it's guests that they may not be as familiar with. You have some behind the scenes work that you've done that would probably be something that they would recognize, as well as now a very active life in encouraging and motivating corporate groups. So let me kind of set the table for you. What is the story of John Davis?
Okay. I'll try to keep it short so we can get into some real deep conversation. So this is good. Okay. So back when I was in my early 20s, I really had a golden life to be a stuntman, a fight director, and a guy who did sword fights for a living. That was what I wanted to do. And I ended up working at a Renaissance festival and hooked up with two gentlemen who were two of the top fight directors in the country. And they saw talent in me as an actor and a combatant and offered me their training for free, which was like an incredible experience. Well, so here I was getting strong and buff and muscular and doing fights and stunts and flips and rolls and jumping off towers and all kinds of crazy things. And 22 years old, a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, can you come help me unload my van?" And I drove out to his house. He was a professional potter, he made pottery. He had a van full of 80-pound boxes of clay. And so I climbed up into this box of clay and I lifted the first box and I turned to set it outside of the van, and my upper body separated from my lower body, and I collapsed and was paralyzed. They hauled me to the hospital. They told me flat out, you can give up on being a stuntman, you can give up on being a fight director, you can give up on any physical career. You have a condition known as spina bifida occulta, to which I promptly said Gesundheit. Because the idea was I had no idea what that was. And basically what that means is that three of my vertebrae never formed properly at birth. And when I twisted that day with that extra 80 pounds of weight, my upper spine literally disconnected from my lower spine and pinched off my spinal column. So here I was in pain, lying in a hospital bed, and someone came in and gave me a book called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. And, I was also into martial arts at the time. And the book talks about his philosophy for martial arts. But the thing that struck me was the area that he talks about his mental flexibility, being like water. And they told me, "You're done," right? So they told me there's no way I would do anything. And I worked my way out of that bed using mental flexibility and really managing my own fears. And came out on the other side. I did over 4,000 live comedy sword fighting stunt shows all over the world, including the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan on 6 USO tours. I've worked in films. I've been on fire. I've jumped off towers. I've done more crazy physical things than anybody has ever done. And I never had my back fused, which is what they wanted to do. They wanted to put a pin in my back. And I told them they weren't allowed to, because I wouldn't be able to do my high falls. I wouldn't be able to do my rolls because I did not take my eye off my goal. And that's my Reader's Digest story.
Well, what did they do? Is it all duct tape and rubber cement?
It's all yoga and weightlifting to strengthen my back is what it is.
So a lot of hours, a lot of hard, grueling hours.
A lot of hard, grueling hours, and 3 months literally in a bed where I could not move. And when I finally was starting to be able to get my motion back, every day they would come in and they would tell me, "You have to get out of bed every day." And getting out of bed meant that it was someone coming in, grabbing me under my arms, lifting me off the bed, because I couldn't get from a laying position to a standing position, or even a seated position alone. So they would get me up to that position, and they would get me up to the place where I could almost stand off the bed. And then they would pull me up to a standing position. Once they got up to a standing position, the two of us, it was very interesting. We would do a thing that I would call a dance. We would sway back and forth until I could get enough momentum behind one of my legs to start the motion going. And once the motion started, I could use the momentum of the motion to walk.
Wow.
And then I would walk to the bathroom, and then I would sit on a toilet, and then we'd have to go through the whole process to get me off of the toilet, right? And
And this
so,
is
and that's
this
an
is every
embarrassing
day. This is all the
every day,
time, every day.
right? And so we arranged it twice a day. I would use the restroom, and that was my walking for the day, you know.
Well, back at the beginning of your story, John, you said something that really caught my attention. You said, I always dreamed of being involved in stunts and swordplay. And I thought, well, that's not a sentence you hear every day. So, what was it about the young John Davis that caught your fancy in those unusual ways?
I loved the old swashbuckler movies, and all the rope swinging and the pirates and the sword fights. And my favorite movie of all time was Errol Flynn's Robin Hood. And when I was a little tiny kid, everybody had their color TV. We still had a black and white. And I thought Errol Flynn's Robin Hood was in black and white for years, but it's not. It's one of the first in Technicolor, actually. But I was very enthusiastic about the sword fights and the rope swings, and the more I got into that, I really wanted to do that kind of work. I just really enjoy that. I was always the kid with the stick in his hand, pretending it was a sword. And then years later, after I met those two gentlemen I mentioned, they introduced me to a man named Patrick Crane. He's passed away now. Patty Crane in Errol's last few swashbuckler films was his stunt double. And so I had a chance to work with Patty in a couple of classes, take some classes from Patty. And so, yeah, it was kind of a full circle experience for me.
From that standpoint of the stunt double world, I don't know that very many people understand how frequently they are used in major motion pictures and major presentations. I read a book a few years ago about Hal Needham, who I think is probably regarded as one of the most famous stunt directors and stunt men of all time. And the thing that he did was just crazy. And every once in a while, you'll hear about a star who says, I'm going to do my own stunts. And then the movie production company says, no, you're not. And they bring in somebody to kind of replicate that person in the film. You see them from behind, of course, and they do camouflage the face quite a bit. But the work is incredibly dangerous. We're not messing around here. There's only so much that CGI can do. You've got to have a live body going through it all. So as you're dreaming of that, and then you have this freakish incident where you're paralyzed, and now you're starting the grueling rehab that probably, I don't know how long it lasts, but you can tell me. At some point came the first time that you were going to put all this to the test. What was the first time, and was it frightening? Was it scary just to think about the idea?
No one has ever asked me that question, and I'm so glad that you did. Because it took me almost a year to get back to being confident of being able to live a normal life, not doing stunts, living a normal life. And it was a year and 6 months that I jumped off a 3-story tower into a fall pad. And it was me standing on top of that tower. First of all, there was a huge swell of pride for being on top of the tower because I had come a long way to get there. When I got on top of that tower, I used the same principles I used to get out of the bed, and that was to keep my eye on my goal and release my fear. And they tell you when you're on top of a tower and you're not focused on the tower, you're not focused on the jump, you're focused on where you're going to land, right? Right.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So that's the same thing I had to do when I got there. By the time I got to that tower, it was more scary walking up to the tower than it was jumping off of the tower. Because it was like, okay, here we go. The anticipation of, is this going to happen? And I went off that tower and I landed and had no pain. I had worked my back into a very healthy condition. I mean, the yoga, the weightlifting, and I got the muscles. I'm basically still today, my muscles hold my lower back together.
So there's not been a surgical repair of this separation of the spine. It's still all muscle related.
It's all muscle related. There's no, and every day I get up and I have to make sure I do something physical every day.
Yeah.
It can't just be a walk to the mailbox. It has to be like, I have to do something physically to work those muscles every day. If I don't work those muscles, the next day will be very difficult.
Why didn't you Why didn't you just move on to something else, John? Why did you go through not only the physical rigor of all of it, but then the confronting of the fear, that moment that you're standing on the edge of the three-story building, which kind of makes me nervous just to even describe it. Why not just say, I think it's about time I moved into accounting?
Well, first of all, I am not a mathematician in any way, shape, or form. That's my son. He's 17, and he laughs at me when I try to do math. Um, Second of all, as I said earlier, it was my dream. It was my passion, and no one should be able to take your passion or your dream away from you. Your passion and your dream is yours, and it's one of the things you have to hold on to. When I did my studies on how the brain works and how we get to our next level of achievement, one of the things I had to realize was when I talked to the soldier on the front line, I said, every day you're going out there and people are shooting at you. How do you do that? And they say, well, the first thing we do, we have to set our fear aside. The second thing to do is setting our fear is easy, because the second thing is we have an objective that we're focused on. So you have to get like seriously focused on what it is you want to achieve. And so for me, my when I read the Dao Jeet Kune Do and I saw the Be Like Water, I came away with the realization that when an obstacle comes up against your dream, the next thing that you have to do is you have to realize that the obstacle came up because you're getting your dream. It came up because it's something that had to be cleared away, addressed, or just forgotten. Something that has to be addressed basically to get to your goal. So rather than thinking it's something that's going to stop you permanently, it's just something that has to be addressed to get your dream, because you can have any dream you want.
I'm reminded of something that I often share when I'm speaking about famous characters from the Bible, right? Here we are now in the year 2021. And whenever we read a story of something incredible that happened, we think that it made sense to those people while it was happening because, of course, we're reading about it. So they must have thought, oh, I'm in the den of lions. This is going to be fun. I can't wait to see how it turns out. I'm wondering, John, during your rehab, if you ever had a day where you just thought, I can't do this anymore. This is ridiculously hard, and I didn't sign up for this. I want out.
I walked through my dark valley many times, and many times didn't want to come out the other side. And it was literally in those moments that I realized that I had a support system around me that I didn't know I had. I mean, when my accident happened, people came out of the woodwork. People were calling me, people were writing me, people were sending me love messages, telling me that we love you and we're here for you. And I suddenly had to realize that I had a support system around me. We're not walking through this world alone. There are people out there who do care. And it's not always the people that are closest to us. It's the people that you don't know you've affected in their lives. I had people contacting me the out of the blue who I hadn't talked to since they were in high school. And they said, you said something to me when I was in high school that changed my life. You are going through this life leaving a wake behind you. And that wake is creating these connections that you get to fall back on when you need a push.
Our guest here on The Big Impact is John Davis. And if you didn't hear the first part of the story, go back and listen to it because he has been through a great deal. And when the rehab and everything pays off and he's able to resume what he dreamed of doing, which is jumping off of buildings, being set on fire, and doing all these things that, of course, we all dream of, from time to time. John, you mentioned that part of your journey includes having gone overseas to entertain our troops on the front lines. Now, you talk about fear and overcoming fear and putting others above yourself. That's such a powerful message. Take us through what got you started in those USO tours and what it was like maybe the first time that you went over there and saw how hungry our men and women were and probably still are for someone to come and say, I care and I want you to laugh for an hour.
Okay. Well, let me kind of back up how we got to that point where they invited us, because I had put together a comedy sword fighting show called Hack and Slash. And the Hack and Slash show
comedy sword fighting show.
Comedy sword fighting show. And it went all over the world. And we did in that show we did bullwhips and sword fights and jumps off of towers and rolls over backs, and it was really a crazy fun show. And we actually at one point I actually laid my partner down on a bed of nails and I broke cinder blocks on his chest with a sledgehammer. so we had a crazy show, and we had done that show for many, many years, and we were performing as one of the headlining acts at the Maryland Renaissance Festival. And on September 8th, get that now, September 8th, 2001,
Oh boy, a week after, or a week,
a
3 days before. I'm sorry.
3 days before, I stepped off stage at the Maryland Festival, and this gentleman walks up and he says, we've been big fans of yours for years, and we were just curious whether you'd ever be interested in doing USO shows. We said, yeah, we'd love to do USO shows. So Monday, September 10th, we stopped by their office and we gave them our packet at the Pentagon. And
Wow.
September 11th, Tuesday, was the next day, and everything shut down. And then they contacted us about 3 weeks later. They said, we want you to go immediately. And so we left in November because to go overseas on the USO tours, you also have to get your shots. Right. So, and there's a lot of shots. And so we left in November. We went from November till February that year. Now, that was 2001. We weren't in Afghanistan yet. But what they were doing is they were moving everybody into Europe to be prepared to go in. And so when you were watching here at the States, when you were watching the planes landing in England preparing to go to Afghanistan, I watched those planes live. When the Muslim soldier threw a grenade into his commander's tent, which got on the CNN, we were on the base when they brought him in under arrest. And so we were literally seeing the world news firsthand. The first tour was all through Europe, as I said. That was a very interesting experience because we were going show to show to show to show, stopping at all these bases, and you could see the anticipation. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know where we're going. And then the second tour was we did Europe again because they were still not prepared. The bases were not stable enough to bring entertainment to them yet. The third year was we went all the way out. We went all the way out into what they call the stands. Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan. They say Kyrgyzstan. All the stands, basically, Afghanistan. And we flew in, and it was a surreal experience. But at that point, I had already gone through so much in my life, and I had already done through so much mental work on how to deal with my own personal fears. I really didn't. Fear never really overtook me in that regard. And I'm not trying to say that to be a tough guy. It just didn't. It was like one of those experiences where I was excited to be there and to do something for them.
Are they a tough crowd or are they an easy crowd? When it comes to doing stunts and things like that, you're doing some of their stuff. It's not just doing a 20-minute stand-up set.
Well, you got to realize that when you see someone do a stunt, that is usually less than 30 seconds of a show. And we're doing a 2-hour show, which we did a 2-hour comedy show with stunts and sword fights and whips. So the majority of our time on stage was comedy. So we did a lot of really funny stuff. So yes, they loved us. they loved us so much. You can't see it here, but if I look over to my left, I've got a wall of plaques from various bases.
Oh, wow.
Are letters of appreciation. I have a flag in a display case here that one soldier saw us in Qatar. They call it Qatar in the States, but it's actually pronounced Qatar. And he liked us so much, he had this flag flown on U-2 spy planes and suborbital, and also in drones on missions. And then he had a plaque made that listed all the missions that the flag flew on. And then he personally carried that back to the States and brought him to us at a show we were doing, because that's how much it meant to them. Over there, they thought of their day as kind of like the movie Groundhog's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Where every day is the same. Only difference was every day is the same, but every day somebody's trying to kill you. And so we would show up, and we would get out. We were doing a comedy sword fighting show. Now, there's not a lot of time zones that do eras that did sword fighting. So we were dressed in Elizabethan clothing. So we would show up in Afghanistan and step off of a helicopter in Elizabethan clothing and flak jackets. And we would go over and we would do 2 hours of comedy for them, and then hop back in. And I had a soldier come up to me, and this was the thing that told me what I was doing was important. We were in Ramadi, Iraq on one of our tours, and a soldier come up to me after the show. He said, "Mr. Davis, this morning I was in a firefight. This afternoon for 2 hours. You let me forget all about that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
We were the pressure release valve.
Those are powerful memories, not just for the soldiers, but I would think for you and everybody involved in your troop, that's got to be the kind of thing you'll take with you until your final breath, knowing that in some way, all of the labor that you put into rehab and to training and to developing a 2-hour show. I don't know if anybody's ever thought about getting on stage to do anything for 2 hours and the amount of prep it takes, let alone the physical aspects of what you're describing. And to know that it did help some of our heroes for a small window of time, that's got to be one of those validators that reminds you that, you know what, I'm glad I stuck with it, because had I not, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I've said this so many times, whether you're volunteering at your local rescue mission or doing something for somebody that lives next to you, in the long run, you end up getting probably more out of it than they did. And it sounds like that's what happened to you.
It is the thing in my life that I am most proud of besides my son. My son will always be the number one thing I'm most proud of. But that is, of all the things I've done in my life, it is the thing that I think I've left the most impact positively on the world. And go ahead. No, go ahead.
You're working with swords and whips and things. I got to think that at some point somebody got nicked. You know, maybe it didn't go as perfectly well as choreographed. Did you ever have any close calls? Did somebody grab the first aid kit?
I don't know if you can see this, but let me see. Let's see. Broadsword scar, nunchuck scar, rapier scar, and this is old age.
we can't fix that one.
Can't fix that one. But yeah. You know, it's funny when you do the kind of work I do, and you do it, like I said, I did that comedy show with the whips and everything over 4,000 times.
Wow.
And, you know, accidents happen. Luckily, because there's a difference between stage stunt work and film stunt work. In stage stunt work, you do the work so that you can repeat it multiple times, right? In film stunt work, they go in, they learn a crazy stunt, and they're not really planning on doing it for 6 weeks or a month, right? They're planning on doing it for a day or two to get it on camera. And so it's a very different mindset, where for stage work, you really have to make sure you're doing things very safely, and they'll take much more risk in film. In fact, I will pretty much guarantee there hasn't been a film with action in it that did not have blood on the set somewhere. I can pretty much guarantee that somebody's cut their arm or scratched their head or something, but everybody has bled in those movies. It's just the way it is. They don't have as much time to like do it as you would on stage, because you've rehearsed it for 6-7 weeks before you get there. I just did an interview the other day with Braun McGash, who was the fight choreographer for the Highlander TV series. He's a real good friend of mine. And Braun and I were talking about some of the fights he would do, where they would have a scene in the show where they would get there that morning and they would teach Adrian Paul, who was actually the star, how to do the fight. And Adrian Starr was a good martial artist and was a good fighter. So they would get there that morning, he would learn the fight, and then they would go out and they would perform the fight and put it on film that day. And I'm like, that's insane. You know, that's really, you know, as far as a stage performance, right? But then he was telling me that on one of their most famous episodes, there was this wooden platform that these two guys had to fight on. And they got there that day and they rehearsed the fight. They did it all right. And they came back for when it was time to shoot, and it was raining. And they had to do the whole fight on this slippery platform. And they said they got through it and they did it, but it was not a good experience. So I mean, that's the way films work. You have to realize when a camera turns on, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars per minute while it's running, per minute. And so they don't want to turn it off. They want to get the shot.
Our guest here on The Big Impact is John Davis, stuntman, entertainer, comedian, sword fighter. I don't know what else to put on the description, but other than accomplished leader and a dynamic speaker. And John, as you're talking about all of those memories from the days of doing stunts. I know now that you're a college professor at Oberlin College in Ohio, which doesn't automatically make you a Buckeye, which is why we're able to have this conversation. But you're also doing a lot of training and inspiration for corporate groups. And whether you can go there in person these days or not, who knows? But we know that the message is still very strong, including one that kind of takes us down a theme of what you call the 5F protocols. And I'd love to have you introduce that concept to our audience. It's so important, and I really love the way that you present it.
Great. So first of all, let me say I'm no longer teaching at Oberlin because I do all of my work as a keynote speaker now and a motivator. The 5Fs are based in the fight or flight response and how to hack that fight or flight response to achieve more. And one of the things that is that we have to go through in that process is understanding that it is our mindset that gets us to achieve anything. And so the first of the 5Fs we've kind of touched on already. It's fearlessness. How do you set your fear aside? Now, before you can set your fear aside, you have to understand what fear is. When I ask people what fear is, my audiences always go silent. And then I hear this little voice in the back of the room will say, false evidence appearing real. And I'm like, yeah, that's the one that I hear all the time. That's the number one answer. And I don't believe it because of the fact that fear doesn't come with evidence, because fear is an emotional reaction to some future event that may or may not happen with the focus on a negative outcome. It's just literally negatively focused uncertainty. And so you have to learn how to set your fear aside. The way you set your fears aside is exactly how they do it. It's how the stuntmen do it. It's how the soldiers did on the front lines. It's how the actors on Broadway do it. The actors on Broadway, if they forget their lines when they're on stage, they are trained to exhale, relax all their muscles, and all their lines rush back into their head, right? Because what happens when you go into a fear response, your body drops into the fight or flight response. Your body naturally goes like this and gasp for air, right? And then people who are afraid say, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. It's not that they can't breathe. It's that their body is holding air in. And the reason their body is holding air in is because the body's preparing to run further and faster. So it's keeping the air in. By exhaling, you shut off the response and all your lines rush back into your head on Broadway. And the soldier on the front line can go, okay, I can get back on my objective. And the guy on top of the tower getting ready to jump can say, oh, I can look at the pad. Because that's the second F. The second F is focus. You get fearlessly focused on what you're doing. And you have to realize that you can focus on good or you can focus on bad. If you focus on something negative, you're going to see negative things. If you focus on something positive, you're going to see positive things. If you've ever known a negative person, you'll know they always have something to be negative about. That's because that's where their focus is. So they fearlessly focus. The next one's faith. And I'm not talking religious faith. I'm talking confidence, belief that you can. And so if you can fearlessly focus with faith. Now, my son, he's 17 now. At one point, we were playing a game with a Nerf crossbow, and I kept missing the target purposely because he was my son, right? And he was going to win. And at that point, he was 6, and he's 17 now. But back when he was 6, I kept missing the target, and he started laughing. He says, Dad, I know why you miss. I go, why do you think I miss? He says, because you don't believe you're going to hit it. You got to believe you're going to hit it to get it. So fearlessly focus with faith. Here's the tough one. Here's the toughest of all of them, actually. It's follow through. Actually getting off your butt and doing something. You actually literally have to take an action. They talk about thought, word, and deed. Deed is the last one that's in that 3. You actually have to take an action and do something. So you have to act fearlessly, focusing with faith, and then take an action. And then the last of the 5 F's is one we've already touched on, and that is flexibility. To get out of that bed, I had to remain flexible in my mind. But the thing is, whenever you're trying to achieve anything in your life, you're going to run into something that's going to seem to be contrary to what you want. And at those moments, you can choose to shut down, or you can choose to keep moving. You can choose to accept it. For me, I had to change it. Now, with follow through, we talked about those moments. You have to take that action. Well, if you think about that moment, that you only live one conscious moment, and it's your present moment. And So, I mean, you can't go to the store next Thursday right now, and you can't go to the store last Thursday right now. You can only go right now, right? It's the only moment you have. It's the only moment that thought, word, and deed actually can work together. And so a lot of people sit in this moment, and this is the moment that I was in lying in that bed, looking at that outcome that I wanted, thinking, I want to get there. But that's not the way the brain works. The way the brain works is you take present moment actions and the success comes to you and surrounds you in your present moment, right? So you have to make small present moment successes and let them stack on top of each other so that that can surround you. What's really cool about that is those present moment successes build behind you a string of successful present moment memories, which becomes a subconscious belief. And then everything gets easier because now your past belief, which is being pushed back of all the things people who told you couldn't, is now being filled in with people who, with you saying, no, I'm a successful person. And so everything gets easier as you go along. I have been to 30 countries around the world. I've been a fight director, a stuntman, a comedian, a college professor, an executive, and a motivational action hero. All right. I've done a lot of crazy things in my life. And I've climbed Mount Sinai. I've been inside the pyramids of Giza. I've been on top of Machu Picchu. I've done all these crazy things because of the fact that I didn't limit myself and that I knew that I could do whatever I wanted to do. And I stayed in that focused mindset of, I am an action hero. Now, what's an action hero? The word action means create motion, start momentum, or to do something. The word hero is someone who achieves an extraordinary result in service of others. And so I live my life as an action hero. I go out into the world to serve.
Hmm.
And in serving others, I sometimes have to serve myself because when the plane's going down, you have to take your own oxygen mask before you help others. You have to build yourself up.
You and I are talking at a time that we think is near the end of this pandemic, right? We think we're getting close to there. Whatever your definition of that is, at some point we think we're going to be past
Well,
this.
we hit a milestone today.
Yeah, and there's good things happening. And one of the things that I've been saying for the last year is that this time in life is sort of a forced sabbatical where we can either cower in fear, which usually happens if you don't turn off the news at some point, or you can take this opportunity to recalibrate and to figure out who you are, where you are, and what you are, and where you want to go. And it's been so cool for me to watch so many people that I care about rise up above what seems to be the desire for everybody to just cower in fear forever, and instead decide, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give into it. I'm going to set some goals. Maybe they're physical goals. Maybe you say, hey, I'm not working in the office for a year. Let me grab a Peloton and do something at home, or whatever it happens to be. Maybe it's a relational goal. Maybe it's a societal goal. Maybe it's to serve more at charities in your neighborhood because you have some time to do that. Whatever it is, we're at that time where this period, this forced sabbatical, I think is kind of about to come to an end. And to me, the greatest tragedy would be if you got to the end and looked back at, man, what was it like over that year of 2020 and a little bit of 21, and you said, I wasted the whole time because I was afraid to do anything.
Right.
And as you described, John, your strategy, the 5F protocols for bringing people past fear and into taking those daily steps that lead you towards the goals that you had, I think it's as important a message now as it ever has been, because I can't imagine getting to the end of whatever this is and realizing that you wasted the entire time.
Well, one of the things that you said that I thought was really important was you talked about, the news. If you're watching the news, it's going to be negative, right? Most people don't realize that we live in a predominantly positive world. And I can prove it. Here's the proof. I live in Akron, Ohio. Cleveland is 30 miles north of me. Now, let's say I had a job in Cleveland. I could hop in my car and commute to Cleveland every day. And on that commute, I'll probably pass 1,000 cars on the road. Now, every few days, possibly every day, let's just say every day, I might see a car on the side of the road that had a fender bender. Tonight, on the news is going to be the car with the fender bender, because it was the anomaly. What should be on the news is that 999 cars made it safely to their destination without any incident whatsoever, right? So you can focus on the car on the side of the road. You can focus on the fact that 999 cars, 99.9% of the time, are was predominantly positive. The other thing is, it's like when COVID hit me, I'm a corporate speaker, right? My job is to go into small rooms with lots of people and entertain them and get in very close contact, bring them on the stage, do crazy things. And suddenly it was like, okay, COVID hit. All your events cancel. Bam. All of them gone, right? So what did I do? Okay. This was just one of those obstacles that came up. And to me, it was like, okay, I got to deal with this. What do I do now? I upgraded my video studio. I put up my green screen, right? Right. I did my whole setup, and I upgraded that. I started putting daily videos out. You go on YouTube, you find a daily video from me, right? I started doing. I'm building right now online courses, which won't happen for a little while because I'm not going to release anything until they're perfect, till they're right. Um, but I had the time in this year to do those things. In the past 2 months, I have been a guest on 18 podcasts. Because that's just I can't speak, but I can market right now. You know,
Right.
I can
Right.
look at what I do and go, okay, this is just a thing that came up that's stopping me now from getting to my goal. It's not going to stop me permanently.
Yeah.
I'm just
And
going
it,
to adjust with it. And when I
and
come
it,
out when I come out of COVID, I'm going to have a whole new virtual platform that I can also do more
right.
events with. I have
Right.
live events, virtual events. I'll have online courses. I mean, I'm going to end up being much more profitable because of COVID.
It's provided an opportunity for you to do the things that you would not have had time to do if you were fully booked. That's just how it is. It's the same thing in my world. You have this forced sabbatical. So I sure appreciate the perspective that you bring to all that. You and I could talk for hours about all these things. It's quite fascinating. However, for our audience, as we wind down our time together today, for anybody who wants more info on the corporate action hero that is John Davis, where can you send us?
Easiest place to find me is corporateactionhero.com.
You
And
actually found that URL. That's amazing.
corporateactionhero.com. And if you go there, you'll find my LinkedIn, you'll find my Facebook. But something I want to do for your audience today is I want to give them a free gift. And let me just say this now. I said the word free, and Action Hero is always true to their word. I'm never even going to ask you for an email. I'm just going to give you a link and you can go there and download it, because it has I don't want something in return.
Hmm.
If you're going to be on my site anyway, look around, find out things you like, whatever. That's great. I don't need anything from return. All I want is you to take this book. What it is, it's the 5F workbook. Helps you go through your process of how to achieve more in your life and set your fears aside through the 5F process. And so I'll make sure you get that link. And other than that, corporate action hero, find me there.